And just remember, what you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
Well, paging George Orwell, Donald Trump's full-on gaslighting of America gathered new steam this week with that particular gem. And although he was complaining about the media coverage of his trade policies, one can assume it goes double for Russiagate. My panel is back with me. And, Paul, in the break, we were talking about the fact that Donald Trump is still denying, we should repeat that, he's denying that he knew in advance when he said, I'm going to do this great speech about Hillary Clinton, the Clintons. He's denying that he knew a meeting was going to be set up. Okay. But we also know for a fact that he dictated Don Jr.'s cover story for the meeting from Air Force One. How does all of that work together play Mueller for us? How is he going to look at that?
So in papers to Mueller, Trump's lawyer said that Trump dictated the memo, which was a lie. It was a false narrative about the subject of that meeting. And why do you lie? Why do you cover up if everything's on the up and up? So that's consciousness of guilt on President Trump's part. And we think about guilty of what? At least 4 crimes. Campaign violations, computer fraud, if Trump knew that some of the information was coming from hacked emails, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and obstruction of justice precisely for that false narrative. That memo, that press release, that was a flat-out lie.
And, you know, what's interesting, Nayyera, is that the committee, what we call on the show the Committee to Protect the President, these House Republicans who've made it their mission, led by the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, and his fellow travelers there, they've tried to say that this entire narrative is a lie made up on the basis of the Christopher Steele dossier, that essentially a political document designed to destroy Donald Trump is the basis for all this. But at this point, the calls are coming from inside the House. Okay, Michael Cohen is mad as hell and he's not going to take it anymore, is a Vanity Fair headline. Emily Jane Fox, who's a Cohen, very knowledgeable about Cohen, and she reports there's a lot more to come. There's a lot. You're with someone for 10 years. You don't think there's a lot? The Trump Organization is a big business, and nobody in that place made a decision without his knowledge. So the idea now, it's not Christopher Steele, it's his own people.
Well, and he is known to be a micromanager and somebody who refuses to let go of the reins in any way. And that didn't necessarily work for him as a businessman because he's been bankrupt 11 times. So certainly doesn't trust expertise of other business people. And it's not working as president. Typically, this is why the president has a committee to protect him within the White House, right? You're supposed to have people who deal with some of the hard stuff and give you legal cover. Right. Instead, Donald Trump is getting down into the weeds of even what a press release says and trying to control his own narrative to the point where it's his ego rather than the facts that are taking over everything. And that ultimately, that ego is going to be his downfall.
And David Cay Johnston, now you have the Trump Organization's finance chief being called to testify before the federal grand jury. His name is Alan Weisselberg. He's considered a witness. People said, according to the Wall Street Journal, it's not known where he's already appeared before the grand jury, what questions prosecutors of New York Southern District have for him. Tell us a little bit about this Trump Organization and how it could get dragged in your view. How involved is the Trump Organization in the Trump political organization?
Oh, this is all one piece. Donald is a micromanager, but he's also not a detail person. And he issues directives, I want this or that done. And Alan Weisselberg's involvement with the Trump family goes back to when Fred Trump was running the Trump Organization. And let's not forget that Fred Trump's business partner was Willie Tomasello, identified in law enforcement reports as a front for the Gambino and Genovese mafia families. All the money in and out, whatever payments took place, whatever contracts had to go, Weisselberg will know about those. He may well be in a position where, when called to testify, he's going to invoke his Fifth Amendment right, which we all have and we shouldn't draw any conclusions from. But I'm sure prosecutors, and Paul and Ned can talk about this, would in a moment give him immunity, transactional or prophylactic, because we don't care about him. He's not the focus of this, but he knows where the money went, and where the money came in and where it went out is critical to understanding what's going on here.
And Nick Ackerman, if you are the prosecutor, who gets immunity? Who would be the person that you would want to immunize to get them in front of that grand jury?
Well, I think Weisselberg is clearly one of those people. I mean, he was involved in every single one of Donald Trump's tax returns. There's no doubt in my mind that Mueller has those tax returns. But when you look at returns, you see different entries, you see different companies. You can never really just look at the returns themselves and understand what happened without having the tax preparer actually explain the entries and take you through the flow of money and the flow of information that goes from the underlying records, whatever those may be, into the returns. So, in a sense, Weisselberg is an extremely important witness with respect to understanding how the money came into Russia, went into the Trump organization, how it was reported, what companies were used to hide that money, who was responsible for that, and then what happened to that money. So it's not just a matter of, we could all have his returns, but you really need somebody like Weisselberg who can really explain to you what those numbers mean and the significance of everything that appears on those returns.
And Clint, you know, I think one of the things that frustrates a lot of people when they look back on all that happened in the 2016 campaign is that while the CIA was sort of hair on fire about the foreign piece of it, about what Russia was doing down to the granular piece of saying, no, they're trying to help one of these two candidates get elected, Donald Trump, the FBI was very, very slow and deliberate about proceeding to that conclusion. Is this complexity that we're talking about, where you've got the Trump organization tied to it, you've got Donald Trump and his family tied to it, is this the reason that it did take so long for the FBI to get there, in your view?
Well, you have to remember how the FBI works, and that is they work based on cases. They have to build and open a case. So the hacking opens up a case, but you have to then do attribution of the hacking and track it back. That takes a very long time in cyber, and I think we've seen that with the Mueller indictments. It took many years for them to essentially get to that level of attribution. The other part is you don't necessarily know that these financial transactions, especially if they've not been brought as part of a case, are tied to any sort of foreign influence. And I think the third big thing to remember is the FBI's mission is to do counter-espionage. The counterintelligence program is really going after spies. So part of this is no one really has the assignment from protecting the American public from foreign influence. There is no agency that's really part of that. There is no task force. There's no entity that you go to for that. So when the FBI looks at this, they're looking at it as a series of cases. They're going to be very slow to do this because they're not really looking afar, trying to identify how a foreign influence effort would work in social media, in hacking, maybe through white-collar crime or through oligarchs or even through, you know, meetings with foreign contacts. Each of those takes a long time to develop. Putting it together is not something they're going to be able to do very quickly.
And I think that's a really important point. So when we come back, and we're actually going to keep this panel over because they're so great. We're going to keep them over. And Malcolm, I'm going to tee you up for on the other side of the break because I think that's one of the things that frustrates people that they don't understand. The FBI investigates domestic crimes, but this other foreign intelligence piece was very active at that time. You were talking about it. We were talking about it on this show every week. So let's talk about why it is, in your view, that it wasn't able to be stopped, and then some of the threats to the next election because they're already happening. Much more coming back. Stay right there.